Young millionaire gave the key to his mansion to a stranger who was in the rain with his daughter. When he returned to his house and entered without knocking on the door, was horrified by what he saw. Eduardo has always been a prodigy. From an early age, his sharp mind and strategic vision set him apart among peers. At just 28, he had already built a financial empire 10 times larger than he had inherited from his parents, something that many took a lifetime to achieve. His firm, specializing in high-risk investments, was internationally recognized, and he, in turn, was seen as a business genius. Eduardo was a tall young man, with an always impeccable posture that conveyed confidence. Her brown hair was well-groomed, always aligned, and her piercing blue eyes seemed to see through people, unraveling their innermost secrets. He wore designer suits that perfectly shaped his athletic physique, and his smile was captivating, capable of opening doors and winning hearts. Despite his imposing appearance and unquestioned success, Edward carried within him a deep emptiness. Luxurious parties, sports cars, and exotic travel, which were once sources of pleasure, had lost their luster. He often found himself staring out of his office window at the top of a skyscraper in New York, gazing at the horizon with a sense of unease that even he could not comprehend. All this success, all this wealth, and yet, I feel like something is missing, Eduardo thought, as he watched the chaotic traffic below. It was a suffocating feeling, as if trapped in a golden cage, surrounded by luxury but isolated from true happiness. What Edward could not understand was that the emptiness he felt could not be filled with material things. Despite being generous and constantly donating to charities, he felt that his actions were mechanical. Without a true emotional connection with the people he helped, he was never present, always distant and falling short of everything. Their personal relationships also suffered. Their interactions, though polite and cordial, were superficial. He didn't have many real friends, just coworkers and acquaintances who admired his success, but didn't know the man behind the facade, and it was bothering him absurdly. One night, while at one of the most exclusive parties in town, Eduardo found himself surrounded by wealthy and influential people. However, instead of feeling excited, he felt lonelier than ever. He looked around and saw smiling faces, but everyone seemed to be wearing masks. Do they feel that way too? So empty inside, he wondered. Eduardo needed to find an answer to this emptiness, something that would give meaning to his life beyond material success. Feeling suffocated by the party atmosphere, he decided he needed a moment to himself. With firm but hurried steps, he headed for the bathroom, trying to avoid any interaction on the way. He opened the door to one of the luxurious toilets, closing it behind him with a heavy sigh. The bathroom was spotless, decorated with Italian marble and soft lights that created an almost surreal atmosphere. Edward approached the mirror, watching his reflection with a mixture of frustration and despair. His blue eyes, which had so often impressed and intimidated others, now looked empty and tired. He ran his hands through his hair, slightly ruffling it, trying to find some sign of real life on his own face. "Why am I feeling this way?" he muttered to himself, his voice echoing faintly on the marble walls. "I have everything I ever wanted, but none of it feels true." He leaned closer to the mirror, almost as if he wanted to penetrate beyond the surface of his reflection. Everything seemed out of place, as if he was looking at a distorted version of himself. The fake smiles he wore for the cameras, the polite but empty greetings he doled out during events, all seemed like an elaborate hoax. Looking deeper, Edward saw a lost man, a man who had disconnected from his own essence at some point along the way. He thought of the people outside, all with their eyes fixed on their cell phones, sharing selfies and moments curated to look perfect to those watching from the sidelines. "We're all just pretending," he thought, "all trying to hide our own voids with superficial distractions." He closed his eyes for a moment, trying to calm the turmoil in his mind. Memories of his early career surfaced, the long days and nights of hard work, the excitement of every little achievement and step taken, the sense of purpose and direction. But now, all this passion seemed to have dissipated, replaced by a monotonous and lifeless routine. Edward opened his eyes again, staring at his reflection with determination. He knew he needed to make a change, but the question was, what and how? Eduardo came out of the bathroom fatigued. His heart beat faster because of anxiety. As he walked back to the salon, lost in thought, a waitress approached, carrying a tray with several colorful cocktails. She was young, perhaps in her early 20s, and her smile seemed genuine, something rare in that environment. Her eyes were brown, deep, and sincere, a refreshing contrast to the plastic expressions around her. "Sir, would you like a cocktail?" she asked, her voice soft but firm. Eduardo looked at the cocktails for a moment, but shook his head in the negative. "No, thank you," he replied politely. He was about to walk away, but something in her gaze made him stop. It was a look of curiosity and empathy, a combination he hadn't seen in a long time. "You sound thoughtful," she commented, with a hint of concern in her voice. "Is everything okay? Do you want me to get some water?" Edward was surprised by the direct question. No one there really cared how he felt. "Yes, I'm fine," he replied. But then, as if a barrier had been broken, he added, "I'm actually a little tired of this party." "Don't think so. Everything seems so superficial." The waitress smiled slightly, saying in a low voice, "I understand what you mean. I've been working here for a while, and sometimes it feels like I'm catering to actors on a big stage." She laughed. Edward laughed for the first time that night with her sincerity. "That's a great way to put it. I'm Eduardo, by the way," he said, holding out his hand. She shook his hand. Her skin was soft and warm. "Nice to meet you, Eduardo. My name is Clara." "You don't seem to fit in here," Eduardo observed, intrigued. "Your look, it's different." "True." Clara blushed slightly. "Thank you. I try to be myself, even in a place like this. I think it's important." Before Eduardo could answer, a group of businessmen called Clara insistently, "Waitress, more drinks here." She looked at Eduardo with a silent apology in her eyes. "Sorry, I have to go. It was good talking to you, Eduardo." "Sure, go ahead," he said, trying to hide the disappointment in his voice. She nodded and walked away, moving gracefully among the guests. Edward watched her go, feeling a mixture of hope and frustration. For a brief moment, he had found a genuine connection amid all the falsehood around him. Maybe Clara could help him find the answers he was looking for. He promised himself that he would try to talk to her again before the night was over. Feeling even more out of place and lonely after the brief conversation with Clara, Eduardo decided he needed some fresh air. The atmosphere inside the hall was beginning to suffocate him, and he knew that he would not be able to find the peace of mind he sought there. With determined steps, he headed for the exit and found a path to the garden, a less frequented place at the party. The evening air was fresh and invigorating, a welcome change from the heat and bustle of the interior. Eduardo pulled a pack of cigarettes from his jacket pocket and, with slightly trembling hands, lit one. He was not a regular smoker, but in moments of great tension, the cigarette seemed to offer a brief sense of relief. As he gulped down his first cigarette, he watched the city below, the bright lights stretching as far as the eye could see. Edward's thoughts were profound. "Am I losing my life?" he thought, watching the traffic below. "I have all this success, but at what cost? My mental health? What really matters in this game?" He smoked a second cigarette, then a third, each puff intensifying his reflections. Clara's figure continued to float in his mind. There was something about his presence, his sincerity, that seemed to open a small window of hope. However, she now seemed as far away as the stars that shone in the night sky. Eduardo wished he could talk to her more, find out more about this person who, in such a short time, had left such a deep mark. After finishing the fourth cigarette, Eduardo decided it was time to leave. He returned to the hall, hoping to see Clara again, but she was busy serving the guests. With a resigned sigh, he headed for the main exit. The party continued, with laughter and lively conversation, but he knew this was not his place. "Marcos," he called, spotting his trusty chauffeur beside the car. "Let's go. I've had enough for tonight." "Of course, Mr. Eduardo," Marcos replied with a respectful nod, quickly starting the engine of the luxurious car. Eduardo got into the back seat, feeling exhausted and discouraged, letting himself be hugged by the comfortable seat. As the car slid along the city streets, he looked out the window, reflecting on the events of the evening. "I need to do something," he thought, as the car sped through the silent streets. "Something needs to change. I can't go on living this way." When they arrived at his mansion, Eduardo thanked Marcos and entered the house, feeling the weight of loneliness. He knew that the emptiness within himself could not be ignored any longer. That night, Edward's mansion seemed more immense and empty than ever. The high walls, decorated with expensive works of art and luxurious furniture, looked cold and even more lifeless. He found himself in the huge living room, sitting in a leather armchair in front of the fireplace. Flames danced in the fire, casting trembling shadows across the walls, but the warmth of the fire could not warm the coldness he felt inside. Edward sighed loudly, watching the flames with a distant look. He wondered how he had gotten to this point. He had everything many only dreamed of: wealth, success, status. but none of it seemed enough to fill the void that consumed him. Suddenly, the soft sound of footsteps interrupted his thoughts. The butler, an elderly and loyal man named Alfred, entered the room. Alfred had been in the service of Edward's family for decades and had known the young businessman since his childhood. "Good night, Mr. Edward," Alfred said in a gentle but worried voice. "Is everything okay? You look dejected." Eduardo raised his eyes, forcing a smile.
Infine, Alfredo.
"Just tired." Alfred, with his wisdom acquired over the years, was not fooled by the superficial answer. He approached, pouring a cup of tea and handing it to Eduardo. "You know, sir, sometimes talking about what's bothering us can help." Edward accepted the tea, holding the hot cup in his hands, but did not drink it. He looked at Alfred, noticing the sincerity and concern in his eyes. "It's hard to explain, Alfredo. I have everything I ever wanted, but I feel like something is missing." Alfred nodded, sitting down in a nearby chair. "Sometimes, Lord, what we seek is not outside, but within us. Material things and success can bring comfort, but true happiness comes from meaningful connections and a greater purpose." "Meaningful connections," repeated Edward, thoughtfully. He remembered Clara and the brief moment of authenticity he shared with her. "I think you're right, Alfredo. I feel like I've disconnected from people and myself." Alfredo smiled slightly. "The first step to solving any problem is to recognize it. Perhaps it's time to explore new possibilities, open up to new experiences and people, and remember that you do not need to do it yourself. I am always here to help in whatever is needed, just like your father and mother would like me to do." Edward was touched by Alfred's words. "Thank you, Alfredo. Your words mean a lot to me. I think I need to find a new path, something that gives my life more meaning." "I am glad to hear that, sir," answered Alfred, rising. "Remember, life is a journey, and sometimes we need to lose ourselves a little to find ourselves again. Have a good night, Mr. Eduardo." "Good night, Alfredo," Eduardo said, watching the butler leave the room. He looked back at the flames, remembering his parents. The crackling of the flames seemed to pull him back to a simpler and more innocent time, when he was still a child, before his life was swallowed up by ambition and success. He remembered the winter evenings with his parents. Eduardo's father, a robust man with an easy laugh, always told fascinating stories, while his mother, a graceful and tender-looking woman, prepared hot chocolate. They sat together in front of the fireplace, sharing laughter and dreams. One of those nights came back to his mind with clarity. Edward, then 8, was snuggled between his parents, feeling protected and loved. "Dad, tell that story again," he urged enthusiastically, his eyes gleaming with the firelight. "What story, my boy? The navigators or the dragon?" asked his father with a sly smile. "That of the dragon," exclaimed Edward, clapping his hands. "The one where the brave knight saves the princess." Edward's father laughed and began to tell the story once more, entangling young Edward with his words. Their mother smiled, watching them both tenderly, her love for them evident in every gesture and look. Edward also remembered the sunny mornings in the garden, when his father taught him to play football, and the rainy afternoons when his mother taught him to play the piano. Every moment was a treasure, a piece of the puzzle that formed his happy childhood. But with those sweet memories came bitter ones. One day Edward could never forget was the day his parents died. He was only 15 years old. He was a talented but uncompromising boy, much because of the good life he led. He remembered it like it was yesterday. His parents had left for a business trip, promising to return in a few days. Edward stayed with his grandparents, anxiously awaiting their return. But instead of warm hugs and travel stories, he received devastating news. A car accident on the roads of South Africa had taken the life of his parents. Edward remembered the pain he felt hearing those words, as if a part of him had been torn away. The funeral was a blur of sad faces, empty words of consolation, and an overwhelming sense of loss. It was there, standing in front of his parents' coffins, that Edward made a promise to himself. He would become someone successful, someone his parents would be proud of. And this is how he plunged into the world of business, since then devoting every moment of his life to building the empire that he now owned. Edward sighed deeply, feeling the tears silently trickle down his face. He realized that in his relentless pursuit of success, he had distanced himself from the things that really mattered: human connections, love, the simple joy of being with those one loves. "Dad, Mom, I miss you guys so much," he whispered into the flames. "I miss who I was when I was with you. Maybe this is what is missing in my life." He wiped away tears, feeling a mixture of sadness and resolution. He needed to find a way to reconnect with those feelings, to bring back the authenticity and joy he had lost over the years. Edward, still reflecting on his memories, decided to go to bed. He slept restlessly, his dreams mixing memories of the past and anxieties of the present. The next morning, he woke up with a sense of renewed determination. After a lonely but comforting breakfast, he prepared to leave. The sky was covered with dark clouds, and a thin, icy rain fell on the city. As he got into the car, Eduardo watched the wet streets, people rushing to get away from the rain. His driver, Marcos, drove carefully through the slippery streets. Edward, lost in his thoughts, was looking out the window when suddenly something caught his eye. Outside in the rain was Clara, the waitress at the party, with an expression of concern and urgency on her face. She held a small girl in her arms, trying to protect her from the rain with a thin coat. Without thinking twice, he told Marcos to stop the car. "Marcos, stop the car next to that woman," Eduardo said, pointing at Clara. The car stopped gently on the side of the sidewalk, and Eduardo lowered the window. "Clara, please get in the car," he called, his voice full of concern. Clara looked at Edward in surprise, recognizing him immediately. "Eduardo? Oh, me. I can't," she said, hesitantly. "I'm with my daughter." "Precisely for that," Edward replied firmly. "We can't leave them in the rain. Please come in." Clara looked at her daughter, who was shivering slightly from the cold, and then at Edward. The gratitude and relief in his eyes were unmistakable. "Thank you very much," she said, quickly getting into the car with the girl in her arms. Inside the car, the atmosphere was warm and welcoming, a marked contrast to the cold and humid weather outside. Clara adjusted her daughter on her lap, trying to calm her down. Edward watched them both with a mixture of curiosity and concern. "How are you, Clara? And your daughter?" he asked, trying to break the ice. "We're fine, considering the circumstances," Clara replied, with a weary smile. "This is my daughter, Anna. She's 3 years old." "Hi, Anna," Eduardo said gently, smiling at the girl who was looking at him with big, curious eyes. "Thank you for helping us, Eduardo," Clara said, sincerely. "I was going to the doctor with Anna before going to work, but I didn't expect it to start raining so hard." "You're welcome," Eduardo said, shaking his head. "What has she got? I can take them there." Clara hesitated for a moment, but said, I don't know. She woke up bad, I believe just a flu. If you can get us to the hospital, that would be a big help." "I'll do better if you don't mind," Eduardo said, turning to Marcos. "Mark, take us home. I will send a private doctor to see you." "Do you agree, Clara?" Clara hesitated, her eyes reflecting the internal struggle between pride and need. "Me? I don't know, Eduardo. You've done so much for us." "Please, Clara," Edward insisted. "It's the least I can do. Anna needs medical attention, and it's safer to take them to my house." After a moment of consideration, Clara nodded. "All right, Eduardo. Thanks. I'm really grateful." As the car moved again, Eduardo and Clara talked. Edward felt a growing curiosity about Clara's life. She seemed like such a strong and resilient person, taking care of her daughter alone while working hard. "So, Clara, do you work at that party regularly?" Eduardo asked. "Yes," she replied. "I've been working as a waitress for a few years at events to support Anna. It's not easy, but we do the best we can." Edward felt a growing admiration for Clara. His strength and dedication were inspiring. He realized that there was much more to this woman than he had initially imagined. Edward instructed Mark to change course, and before long, they reached Edward's stately mansion. Clara looked around, amazed and a little intimidated by the grandeur of the place. Edward guided her inside, where Alfred, the butler, awaited them. "Alfredo, these are Clara and her daughter Anna," Eduardo introduced. "They are my guests. Please take care of them and make sure they get everything they need. Anna seems to be ill, so call Dr. Mendez immediately." "Of course, Sir Edward," Alfred replied with a respectful nod. "Follow me, please." Alfredo led Clara and Anna to a cozy living room where they could rest while waiting for the doctor to arrive. Clara sat on a soft sofa, holding Anna in her lap, trying to calm her down. "Eduardo, I don't know how to thank you," Clara said, with a mixture of relief and gratitude. "You are being very kind." "Don't worry about it, Clara," Edward replied, with a reassuring smile. "I want you to feel comfortable here. Anna needs to recover, and you deserve a little rest too. I need to leave for a while, but I'll be back later. Alfredo will be here to help you with anything you need. Please, Alfredo, give them warm clothes and ask them to prepare something to eat." "Thank you, Eduardo." "Really?" Clara said, touched by his generosity. Eduardo smiled and said goodbye to them, leaving the room with a sense of accomplishment. He felt good that he had helped Clara and Anna. As he walked away, he heard Alfredo offering them tea and taking them to the bathroom where they could change clothes, assuring them that they were being taken care of. Before leaving the mansion, Edward gave Alfred a few more instructions. Make sure the doctor sees Anna as soon as possible, and treat Clara and Anna with the utmost care. They are my special guests. You may leave it, Sir Edward, Alfred replied with a respectful nod. They will be in good hands. Eduardo got into the car and left the mansion, feeling a new wave of purpose. He knew he still had a long way to go to find true happiness and fill the void in his life, but at least he was starting to make a difference in other people's lives. This in itself seemed to be a step in the right direction. Upon arriving at the company, Eduardo was immediately greeted by a frenetic and energetic environment. The routine of meetings and high-impact decisions that once excited him now seemed like a heavy burden. He walked through the lavishly decorated halls, politely greeting his employees, but his mind was elsewhere. Entering his office, Eduardo sat in his leather chair behind the imposing mahogany desk. He looked at the documents stacked in front of him and at the computer screen full of unread emails. He felt a profound lack of motivation, something he had never experienced so intensely. After a few minutes of quiet contemplation, he made a decision. He picked up the phone and called his assistant. Amanda, call a meeting with the partners. I need to talk to them urgently. A few minutes later, Edward's senior partners were gathered in the conference room. They looked at him with curiosity and a little concern, for they knew that Edward rarely called emergency meetings. Eduardo entered the room, trying to maintain a confident posture despite the internal storm he was facing. He looked at the familiar faces in front of him, people with whom he had shared many successes and challenges over the years. Thank you for coming so quickly, he began, in a firm but calm voice. I know we're all very busy, so I'll be brief. He paused, taking a moment to sort out his thoughts. In recent times, I have felt an increasing need to step away. I need time for myself to reflect and reevaluate my priorities. The partners exchanged worried glances. One of them, Ricardo, an old friend of Eduardo and co-founder of the company, was the first to speak. Eduardo, you have been carrying this company on your back for many years. If you need some time, we understand. But how long are you thinking of taking? I don't have a specific period in mind, Edward replied, honestly. It could be a few weeks, maybe months. I need to quiet my thoughts and find a new purpose. I have confidence in all of you to continue guiding the company in my absence. There was a murmur of agreement in the room. Another partner, John, added, Eduardo, you have always been the driving force of this company, but you also need to take care of yourself. We will support your decision and make sure everything continues to work perfectly. Edward felt a huge weight being lifted from his shoulders. Thank you, John. Thank you all. I know the company is in good hands. With the meeting over, Eduardo felt lighter, but still aware of the great void he needed to fill. He knew that time away from business was just the beginning of a much larger personal journey. Back in his office, Edward began to pack his things, took a small suitcase and put some essential belongings. As he was about to leave, Amanda, his assistant, entered the room. Mr. Edward, can I help you with something? She asked, with a worried expression.
No, Amanda.
Just let the staff know I'll be gone for a while. I trust you and the partners to keep everything in order, Eduardo said with a reassuring smile. If you need anything, I will be available by phone. Amanda nodded, though she still looked worried. We'll take care of everything, sir. I hope you find what you are looking for. Eduardo thanked him and left the office, feeling a little freer from what seemed to him to be ties, but aware that the real journey was just beginning. He knew he needed time and space to find the peace and purpose he longed for. The car glided smoothly through the streets of the city, taking Edward back to his mansion. As he watched the landscape pass by his window, he felt a little calmer after making the decision to take time for himself. However, a restlessness remained in his heart, a feeling that something important was coming. When the car finally stopped at the entrance to his mansion, Eduardo thanked Marcos and quickly left, eager to see how Clara and Anna were doing. Upon entering the mansion, he was immediately confronted by a scene of controlled chaos. There were doctors and nurses in the main hall, and the air was charged with tension. Eduardo felt his heart race. He rushed to the scene and saw Clara standing next to Anna, tears streaming down her face. Anna lay pale and motionless, surrounded by medical equipment. The professionals around looked worried, monitoring the situation closely. Clara, what happened? Eduardo asked, approaching her and holding her by the shoulders. Clara looked at him, her eyes full of despair. Eduardo, Anna, She had silent pneumonia. We had a cardiac arrest not long ago. If it weren't for the doctors here, I could have lost my daughter. Edward felt a chill run down his spine. He looked at Anna, so small and vulnerable, fighting for her life. Thank God the doctors were here, he said, his voice shaking with emotion. She'll be fine, Clara. The best doctors are taking care of her. And if you need more, call. The bed is ready. You can take it, said Alfredo, interrupting the scene and accompanying the doctors and nurses who were taking the little girl. One of the doctors approached Eduardo and Clara with a serious expression, but a little more relaxed than before. Anna had a cardiac arrest, but we managed to stabilize her. She is still in critical condition, but we are doing everything we can. It is essential that she rest and receive intensive care over the next 48 hours. Clara sobbed, clutching Eduardo's hand. Thank you, Eduardo. I don't know what I would have done without you. I probably would have lost my daughter. Edward shook Clara's hand, trying to convey strength and comfort. We're all in this together, Clara. We will do whatever it takes to ensure Anna makes a full recovery. The next few minutes were a blur of medical activity and attempts to console Clara. Eduardo sat next to Anna's bed, watching the little girl who was breathing with difficulty, but who was now under intensive medical care. He felt a surge of emotions, fear, worry, but also a deep determination to help Clara and Anna through this difficult time. As the night wore on, Edward's mansion was overtaken by a tense silence. Doctors continued to monitor Anna closely, while Clara, exhausted and emotionally drained, finally fell asleep in an armchair next to her daughter's bed. Eduardo, feeling the responsibility of taking care of these two precious lives, walked to the window and looked at the rain that was still falling outside. He knew that from that moment on, his life had changed. He was no longer just seeking to fill the void within himself, but now had a concrete and urgent reason to find a greater purpose, realizing that what he possessed was very powerful if used for good. He remembered Alfred's words about meaningful connections and a greater purpose. Maybe that's part of what I was looking for, Eduardo thought. A way to use my wealth and resources to make a difference in someone's life. Edward returned to Clara and Anna, determined to be present and to offer all the necessary support. He knew the journey of recovery would be long, but he also felt a new sense of purpose forming in his heart. It was dawn and Eduardo was alone in his armchair, while he watched the flames dancing in the fireplace, lost in thoughts about the tumultuous day he had lived. The sound of Clara's soft footsteps brought him back to reality. She stopped at the entrance to the room, hesitating. Eduardo, I don't know how to thank you for everything you've done today. If it wasn't for you. He looked up, gentle. Clara, you don't have to thank me. I just did what anyone would do in my position. No, you have done much more. You brought Anna here. You saved her life. He remained serious. I am relieved that Anna is getting the care she needs now. She's a fighter. She smiled slightly. Yes, she is. There was a pause as Clara looked around the room, admiring the grandeur of the mansion. This house is amazing. I never imagined being in a place like this. Make yourself at home and please sit down, says, noticing the sincerity in his words. You've lived through difficult times before, haven't you? Clara sighed, sinking into a nearby armchair. Yes. Less than a year ago, I lost everything. My job, my home. I saw myself on the streets with Anna, who was only 2 years old at the time. I was trying to protect her as best I could, but things were getting harder and harder. Edward listened intently, feeling a growing connection with Clara as she shared her story. I got a job as a waitress. Most of the time I have to take Anna with me to parties, leaving her to sleep in the back while I work. It was a season, challenging to say the least. Now at least we have something to eat and a place to live. He shook his head, admiring Clara's determination. You did what it took to take care of her. That's amazing. Clara looked at him, her eyes reflecting gratitude. And now, here we are, with Anna fighting for life. Edward looked at Clara saying, we will do everything we can to make Anna a full recovery. Edward watched Clara empathetically as she leaned back in her armchair, lost in thoughts of the recent past. Something bothering you? Eduardo asked after a few minutes. Edward, Clara began with a heavy sigh. It was a devastating sequence of events. Anna's father. He made some bad choices. Huge debts, failed investments, and then one day it just disappeared. Edward frowned, trying to assimilate the gravity of the situation. Did he just run away? Clara nodded, her eyes filled with sadness. Yes, it left us with debts we didn't even know existed. It was a shock when the creditors started showing up. We lost our house, I lost my job shortly after, and suddenly we found ourselves with nothing. Edward was silent for a moment, imagining the emotional weight Clara had carried. You had to face all this alone. Yes, agreed Clara, looking into the flames of the fireplace. But Anna was my priority. I'd do anything for her. He nodded, admiring Clara's courage even more. You are an amazing mother, Clara. No wonder Anna is so strong. Clara smiled faintly, grateful for the support. But what about you? What happened? It didn't look good the other day. At the masquerade ball? He smiled. It really wasn't. What happened to stay like this? Clara, the corporate world. It's a strange place, he began, his voice reflecting a mixture of despondency and reflection. It's a place where ambition is encouraged, where success is measured by the size of your bank account, by the number of deals closed. For years, I indulged in this. It was as if each new contract, each new achievement, was a stepping stone that would bring me closer to personal satisfaction. I may look like someone who is complaining about a full belly, but that's not it. Not at all, she answered, listening intently, catching the seriousness in Edward's words. But suddenly, all this stopped making sense, he continued, his eyes fixed on the fireplace. There came a time when I found myself questioning the purpose of it all. All the power and money I've accumulated. What for? I was so immersed in this cycle of seeking more, of being more, that I lost sight of what really matters in life. Edward paused, as if searching for the right words to express the confusion he felt. Now, looking back, I feel lost, he admitted candidly. Ambition brought me material success, but also a sense of emptiness. I neglected the true human connections, the true values that should guide my life. Clara placed her hand on his, conveying comfort and quiet support. Eduardo, sometimes it takes a shock in your life to remind you of what really matters, she said softly. Maybe this is a time for you to reevaluate your priorities, find a new purpose that goes beyond the corporate world. Edward looked at Clara gratefully, recognizing the wisdom in her words. Yes, I decided to take a vacation, indefinitely, Edward began, choosing his words carefully. I still don't know where I will go, but I would like to invite you to accompany me on this journey. Clara looked at him in surprise, a mixture of emotions crossing her face. Eduardo, me? I can't just walk away from my job, my responsibilities, she replied, worried. He shook his head gently, his eyes conveying confidence. Don't worry about it, Clara. I'll figure it out, he assured her, his voice firm. As soon as Anna is better, we can go wherever you want. Somehow, it is important to me that you are by my side on this journey. Clara blinked, processing the unexpected proposal. She could not ignore the sincerity in Edward's eyes, nor the genuine support he offered. Edward, she began, still uncertain. He interrupted gently, placing a comforting hand on hers. Clara, I know it's an unexpected invitation, Eduardo said, earnestly. But I feel like this is a pivotal moment for both of us. A chance to leave our burdens behind and discover something new together. Clara looked at him, her heart beating faster at the thought of the possibility of a new adventure, away from the pressures of the recent past. What if I say yes? She asked finally, searching for safety. Edward smiled, relieved and hopeful. Then we will find out together where this journey will take us, he replied, a gleam of determination in his eyes. And so, under the cozy warmth of the fireplace, Eduardo and Clara took a step towards an uncertain future, but full of promises of renewal and hope. A week has passed since Anna recovered completely, and Clara and Eduardo, together with little Anna, embarked on a journey around the world. They left behind the worries of the past, embracing the opportunity to explore new horizons together. They left for exotic destinations, each place bringing new experiences and learning. From paradisiacal beaches to historic cities, majestic mountains to pristine jungles, Clara and Eduardo plunged headlong into diverse cultures and stunning landscapes, enjoying in each other's company the best they had to offer. During the months that followed, they shared laughter, challenges, and moments of deep connection. Eduardo found a new passion in capturing the beauty of the world through his camera, while Clara rediscovered the possibility of love. On a starry night in the Sahara Desert, as they gazed at the vast, star-dotted sky, Eduardo spoke truthfully. Clara, I never imagined that this journey could mean so much to me. Being here with you, exploring the world, made me realize what really matters in life. Clara smiled, feeling the same gratitude and joy overflow in her heart. Eduardo, you have shown me that there is beauty and hope even in the most difficult times, she replied, looking at him fondly. This journey is not just about the places we visit, but about the discoveries we have made about ourselves and about what we truly value. And so, over the course of more than a year of transformative journeys, Clara and Eduardo, together with little Anna, not only explored the world, but also discovered and transformed themselves, embracing an uncertain future, but full of possibilities. And now they are waiting for their child to be born. Thank you very much to those who have supported the channel financially through the link in the comment pinned. This helps me to bring more and more stories to you. And don't forget to like and also subscribe to continue receiving the new stories.